It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
This, believe it or not, is our second programme for September, and we're never short of things to do, people to interview, and interesting ideas. So, Kate, give us a selection. Whet people's appetite for us.
The second show in September 2020 is bringing us Donald Clark talking about his new book, Suk Pabil talking about his new L&D agency initiative, very exciting, and Helen Routledge is talking about AR and VR for learning.
Excellent, can't wait. I haven't spoken to Donald Clark for a long time, and it's about time I did, particularly as he's got a new book out. Now that book, I'm going to hold it up, but you'll get a clip on the screen to find out where you can buy it from. But this book is about AI, and it's one of Donald's passions, and no one will be surprised that he's written this book. So first of all, welcome, Donald. And just tell me, who did you write this book for?
Well, it's not a technical book, so it's not written for people who are interested in the technicalities of AI. There's plenty of that stuff out there, just search on Google and so on. It was specifically for people in the learning game, okay? And if anything, it's more of a focus on workplace learning, although there's plenty in there for people who are just interested in this for education schools, higher education colleges. But I had in mind really, the people in L&D who, right across the board, whether you're heading up an L&D department, whether you're looking strategically at where you're going in the future, if you're buying an LMS, if you're involved in online technology at all, remember AI is an online thing, then right across the board from a learning experience designer, interactive designer, graphic artist who's just generally making this stuff, right up to the people who are strategically thinking about it, or even just in the administration, or even thinking about policy in this area, So it's a book that was supposed to be very practical. In other words, if you want to know how this stuff is really being used by people in the real world and real projects with real learners, then I focused it down with lots of examples of that.
It's got your voice running through it. I can hear you in it all the way through. And it gives us a huge amount of small examples, and every single element that you talk about is peopled, so it's not a theory or an example, it's an in-depth analysis and scoping of the field.
That's an interesting observation there, because I think one of the things that and I know when I'm writing this, because as I was writing this book, I was doing something else at the same time and writing this big long series of 100 learning theorists. And I really enjoyed that because it forces you to do the reading. Like, you don't get away with skimping it. If you're going to write a couple of pages on Fleming's learning styles and Fleming himself, you really have to get your head down and do the work. So while I was writing this, I was really deeply immersed in the learning theory side, which is about people, by and large. It's about the brain, it's about how we learn, certainly on the cognitive side. So I think I think that's right. I think people think I'm like a learning technology person, but actually most of my time is spent, probably more interested in the learning theory and psychology side, and always have been. And in actual fact, some of these examples and some of these tools were written from the cognitive psychology up, if you see what I mean. So in the meantime, I've been running this company Wildfire. Now that tool, I don't want to plug the tool or anything, but I actually literally built and designed that tool from the people premise upwards. In other words, how does the brain really learn Why does normal e-learning just shove video animation and multiple choice questions at us? What do we really, when we watch a video, do we actually, by the time we get to the end of the 5 minutes, forget the stuff at the beginning? Damn right we do. The research is unequivocal. It's like a shooting star. We just forget it all. And yet how many platforms are out there selling videos? And the Netflix of learning stuff. And yet the research is really clear on this. You have to let people stop, generate their own ideas and context, get them into retrieval practice, reinforce it, space practice. Oh, yeah, there's 101 things we know what you should be doing around video, and nobody's doing it. So this is about people. And I would say more fundamentally about, of course, there's a social, political context, but the brain and how we learn context as well.
What you're saying is that to understand AI, you've got to go back to the way human beings learn and the way the brain works. And one of the reasons it's successful is not because it's amazing technology, is because it more accurately imitates the way the brain learns. Yeah, and therefore, if it can do that, guess what? Learning is more effective. Am I right? Is that true?
Yeah. There are a few things in there that you're right on all of those points. The first thing is it's not one thing. There are many different species of AI. I remember, in actual fact, AI sort of bleeds off in a long tail of mathematics, statistics, and probability theory that goes back 2,000 years to the Greeks and earlier. So it's been a long time coming here. But modern AI, if you want to call it that for a minute, some of it's purely symbolic, has no machine learning, for example, in it. And then there's supervised, unsupervised, there's image recognition, there's the natural language processing area, there's robotics, there's loads of different pools and different approaches. And people don't often appreciate that, that they regard those two letters as one thing. And I suppose that, and therefore they caricature it, they think it's one thing and then start anthropomorphizing all the time. And myself and Roger Schenker, two people constantly say this, it's only software. It's just maths and software. There's, that's why in the book I front up with this notion of it being competence without comprehension. You really have to understand that right at the beginning. There is no comprehension there, no consciousness. It's just the execution of software, but it's very good software.
So it's not really intelligent in that sense, or depends how you define intelligence, of course, but it's basically following patterns and learning sequences and doing things which it can do at rapid rate, much faster than any human brain can do, but it's not intelligent in that sense.
That's correct, yeah. In fact, in the book, I actually am quite bold and blunt about that and say just drop the word intelligence. It was invented by John McCarthy in 1956, the year of my birth. That was a long time ago. And actually, he regretted it. He thought it was a bit misleading. He just came up with the phrase artificial intelligence and it stuck. But you have to unpack that word, and it's a very dangerous word, intelligence, because actually, when anybody utters the phrase, what they mean is human intelligence. That's the benchmark. So it's an example of anthropomorphizing, what is maths. And I think if we quietly drop the word intelligence, we'd make a great deal more sense of this software and its strengths and weaknesses.
One thing that struck me when I read it, when I said I could hear your voice, I could also hear some of your prejudices and your assumptions coming through. You don't stand back and say, I better be neutral about this. You say, this is really important, or this is rubbish and you should completely disregard that. Do you agree that it's got your opinion is a very important component running through the book and your perception?
Yeah, well, very definitely. But there is a reason for that, I suppose, which is, I suppose I'd alter that slightly and say that most of my perceptions in this area, because I did not do the research, has come from other smarter people who have done the research. So when I'm certain about something, it's very rarely based on me. It's just that I do a lot of quite detailed analysis and reading on a topic, and I come to a conclusion on it. And I've changed my mind on a number of things over the years, But I just don't buy this notion that we should be this modern socially constructivist view of the world, that we should be accepting everything. I'm not a cultural relativist. I am just not a relativist. I don't want to be stuck in this swamp where everything is valid, because it's not. And I think it just leads to a mess, and it leads to bad theories hanging around. In other words, it leads to an accumulation of stuff. It's like one of those houses you can't get in the front door because all the newspapers are piled up. We just buy everything, you know, and we sell everything. And we think that behaviorism is right, social constructivism is right, cognitive science is right. They cannot all be right because they're mutually contradictory. So you have to come to a position. I happen to be more on the science side because that's where I've found most of the fruitful, practical. Try building some of that, you know, weirder stuff into your real software and selling it and see how far you get, because it doesn't work.
So could you share with me and with everybody else 3 conclusions that you think come running out of this book?
This is huge, you know, AI. This is not like any other technology in the history of our species, because everything else has been transitory. No other technology challenges us as a species. And when I say challenge, I mean challenge in a good way. No other technology. I ended my talk, another talk today, with the Elon Musk Neuralink example of using AI, where there's a very real possibility, you may think this is science fiction, but I don't think it is, that these tiny 5 micron, a human hair being 100 microns, fibers into the brain may finally meld machine and brain in a very positive sense. And it already has. The Utah arrays, already 150,000 people have them in their brains, and it helps you walk if you can't walk. Use your arms if you can't walk. Huge number of paraplegics and so on being helped by it. So this is real. Now, what's becoming clearer as this technology gets good and you use AI to interpret the data coming out, and Neuralink works with your phone. Massive bandwidth data comes to your phone, and the data analysis can be done on the phone or separately. And what you're looking at here is a massive relief of human suffering. And I've never known a time in my life when that was a possibility. You know, my sister has MS. I've seen a lot of, medical suffering in my family alone, and disabilities and so on. So, if AI does that, thumbs up. But it's also promising something else. So physical disabilities, we're already cracking that as every month goes by. And we already know that AI has helped enormously with a hearing and sight impairment, for example, in learning. You get nowhere without speech to text, and text to speech has been around for decades. But now we're looking at another era where the psychological problems, mental illness, autism, memory dementia might have some ways of melding the technology to help us solve those problems. Imagine the relief and suffering if you cured dementia and Alzheimer's, or even the most basic of mental illnesses like depression, debilitating things that large numbers of people in the population have. Imagine if AI does that. And so that's my first big takeaway. This is huge, transformative, in the sense of the species being transformed, or big problems being transformed. Technology has always solved bits of problems, but not the big ones, almost philosophical ones. So that would be my first takeaway. The second one is more specific to the learning world, because I think AI is a unique technology for learning, because when you dig deep into the technology of AI, so my son has a degree in AI, and I have endless conversations with him. He really is my teacher in this because he knows the detail. I can't tell you how often he uses the word learning when he's explaining an algorithm, a theory, a field, a paper he's read, because AI is fundamentally learning software. It's software that learns as it goes. The more you use it, the better it gets. That's what machine learning is. There's reinforcement learning. There are all sorts of different species of learning. There's literally dozens and dozens of types of learning. So the fact that the software learns, of course, has come from our, as you said earlier, Nigel, our insights in neuroscience into the way the brain works. These were almost metaphorical initially. In other words, do neural networks, can we actually build some primitive neural networks? And people did this in the 50s and 60s. It came through 70s, 80s. Now they're really making it sing. They drive the whole internet. So this matching or congruence between how we think and the technology has been a wonderful sort of, coming together, a melding of machine and mind, if you want to use that phrase again. So it would be absolutely astonishing if AI wasn't the smartest software to teach smart things to smart people. It just, are we honestly saying that HTML5 is the end point in technology and learning? Because that's about what 99% of it is. Are we mad? Who uses that stuff now in the web? Everything I do is mediated by AI. And do people love it? Boy, they love it. They can't get people off it.
So artificial intelligence is not a kind of wonder thing. It's actually part of the grindingly obvious day-to-day solution of getting our society back together again and creating opportunity and balance. I agree. Absolutely. So thank you. The book is called Artificial Intelligence for Learning. It's by Donald Clark and it's published by Kogan Page. Highly recommended. Thank you for your words. Thank you for talking to me, Don.
Thank you, Nigel. It was a pleasure.
I always say I'm delighted to welcome my next guest, but in this case, I really, really mean it. Suk Pabial is somebody that I've been privileged to know for a long time throughout my career in L&D, and I'm excited to welcome him now as Chief Learning Officer of Challenging Frontiers. Suk, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. Now, how are you? Because this is a new venture for you, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's a very new venture, yes.
So it's Challenging Frontiers is billed as an L&D agency. So what is that?
Yeah, I gave that some thought because what I was thinking was that there's enough consultancies out there who can you can go to and you can get the delivery side of stuff from. What I think is missing from the kind of L&D space is a place to go to get independent advice. And that's what an agency should be about, right? It's about where you go and find out, actually, I need to know just something independently of being sold at, a vendor, a supplier, models, theory, whatever it is. Just help me figure out some stuff. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
I suppose because of my marketing background as well, when I hear agency, I think creative. And I know that you've spent some time in that environment in the past as well. Did that inform the thinking for you?
Absolutely, it did. Yeah. So I had some time in a digital marketing and tech agency. And that's precisely where it came from, right? It was the bringing together of different skills to be able to build and design programs and design strategies for clients and for customers, right? And I found that really fascinating because it was a case of, well, if we don't have the expertise, how do we partner and how do we build that expertise? So it's not just housed in one place, but you have a kind of true collaborative attitude and approach to stuff. And that's how I am, right? I like to do that kind of collaborative stuff. So that's where I'm coming from on this.
And so do you think then you sort of kind of going to fill a gap where teams can work with you to kind of skill up, skill down, because actually you'll be able to bring in the relevant expertise rather than them having to hire it or even source it themselves?
I think so. Yeah, right. It's, and you know, if we think about like the typical L&D team, it tends to be either a solo person or a very small team within an organization. And there's only so much that they can do. And of course they can partner with suppliers to get stuff delivered. But when it comes to things like building and designing learning programs or putting together a learning strategy, if you haven't got the power, if you haven't got the skill set, or if you haven't got the manpower to do that, you need to find someone to be able to do it without being sold a model or a theory or something to be able, that you have to also, you know, license out or stuff like that. Yes, that stuff is important and it helps, but also there's a gap there as well, which I think we're going to be able to fill.
And, you know, you've obviously got, you know, a great track record and, you know, you've walked the walk and been that protagonist, that solo L&D person. So you kind of know where they feel. What are some of the challenging frontiers or the challenges that you think that are facing L&D at the minute? Because obviously we're moving into this slightly weird post-pandemic phase now. I mean, you kindly quoted me the other day and said, what did I say? Different kind of normal. So, what do you think now are those priorities and some of those challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's several fold. I think, one is that organizations and businesses are going to have a real different focus for how they get through this. And, one of the things that L&D has always needed to do is be better aligned and be better designed around what are the learning and the business outcomes that they need to focus on. And for now, for the next 6 months, for the next year or two, that's going to look fundamentally different to what it did before. So that's going to be one real challenge, right? Is how do you move away from traditional learning needs analysis to really moving towards business outcomes and organizational, objectives. The senior leaders of your sales leaders, your product leaders, your tech leaders, they're going to need really different things from their teams, from the individuals that they're leading and managing. And that's going to look very differently for what L&D typically design and deliver as well. So that's one thing. The other thing as well then, I think, is that with more and more companies really understanding that they can have remote teams and that people can be productive and that they can produce really great work, that's a whole other world. We're used to being in, meeting people in the corridors, going down and seeing them at their desks and, just hanging out with folk. We can't do that now. So how do we gain that intelligence? How do we gain that insight and data that we need to be able to understand what are the pain points? What are the stuff that you are working through? Because if I can't see you and I can't hear you, where does that richness come from?
And don't you think that's so important as well? There's obviously been an understandable rush to content, digital content around this, and obviously, a lot of that is important, and a lot of it is extremely well-meaning. Providing content and resources around things like resilience, well-being, reboarding, sort of post-lockdown. I haven't got an issue with any of that, but it is those moments of collaboration and reflection and those kind of mentoring type of conversations that you have, but it's not official. That's all sort of part of organizational learning and something that L&D, I feel like L&D maybe doesn't always get involved in that stuff, and that's okay. But we can help facilitate some of that now, can't we?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we absolutely can. And I'm completely with you. I think all of that stuff that you mentioned is really valuable, and we need, and that needed to have been in place. And now what we're going to need to start to think about as internal L&D functions is how do we get close to those conversations when often you don't even know they're taking place, right? Ordinarily you could, someone will be saying, getting up and going, I'm going off to a meeting now. You go, all right, what meeting is that? Those conversations aren't going to be readily available or accessible to you. So I think this is where, the use of tech really starts to come into being as well. If companies are using Teams, if they're using Slack or whatever, is you need to be in those conversations. You need to be in those groups so you can see the stuff that, the people themselves are talking about, get yourself injected into that. I think that's where some of the data and insight comes from. The other side of it as well, I think, which L&D in many ways hasn't been comfortable with is just getting time with senior leaders. So when we're talking to senior leaders, we need to really understand what their pain points are. Just getting time with them, just sitting down with them and just saying, can I have 15 minutes, just help me understand how the last month has been for you? And doing that consultancy stuff, is there stuff that you've needed to focus on that you haven't been able to? Have you needed to work with the teams in a particular way? Have you noticed a different type of performance issue that you've never had before? Let me understand that, and then I can, oftentimes when you have those conversations, the solution surfaces itself, but also it can lead to other stuff as well.
And do you think, obviously it's not it's far from ideal. I would never say that. But, do you think now, because of the changing nature of work and because of the situation we find ourselves in, do you think that this is actually an opportunity for L&D to kind of to step up and, to become really pivotal to helping organizations, not just survive, but thrive?
Yeah, right. I mean, I really like the terminology around thriving, is how do we help an organization to thrive in such difficult times? And, we have to also be really cognizant of, some of the hard decisions that organizations are going to have to make right now. There's going to be redundancies. There's going to be a looming recession coming up. These are going to be hard times. So how does L&D really find their way through this is really starting to question for themselves, where are those opportunities? And not in terms of that exploitative, how can I help the business make money, because we're typically not a money-making part of the organization. But how can I enable the organization to still be successful during what is going to be a really hard time? That's going to involve a very set of different conversations, which are not going to be focused on learning needs and learning outcomes. Because although, yes, organizations will recognize that investing in your teams and investing in your people is important, if it's not invested towards the right stuff, they're not going to care about whether or not you have a fantastic virtual leadership program, because it may not be the right thing for them. If you've got a learning experience platform and the content is amazing, but it doesn't surface the needs that they need, that they have to actually deal with, again, it's why are they bothering with that? Yeah. So there's going to be some really, really difficult conversations, I think, actually, that are going to be needed to be had around, well, here's the resources we have, here's the stuff that we need to deal with. Do they marry? If they do, fantastic, get on, do some amazing work. If they don't, that's going to be a hard set of stuff to kind of untangle and work your way through, right?
And obviously that is what people can potentially contact you about now as well.
That's what we're there for.
So we'll hopefully work our magic and have some contact details up for you on screen. But I think the phrase that really stood out to me that you said then is better aligned and better designed. So, and if L&D can head towards that, then I think that's very exciting. So, best of luck on your new venture, and come back and tell us about it, how you're getting on soon.
Yeah, will do. Thank you very much, Kate.
Our learning experiences unlock potential, transform the performance of people and organisations, and help millions around the world build happy and successful careers. We change lives with evidence-based learning that works, sparking real change for real impact.
Next up, we welcome our new regular contributor, John Hinchcliffe. John is exploring the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic on the roles in L&D and whether or not learning professionals are going to need different skills in the future. Check it out.
Hi there. I am ever so pleased to be able to bring you monthly tips, tricks, and also insights into the freelancing market that I've really been observing here at Jampan. The fact is, COVID has changed everything. It's changed the world that we're living in, and people are saying that the L&D industry will never be the same again. So really what I wanted to do was provide an insight into what have been the changes that have taken place between Q1 and Q2 this year, to really look at where are the skills that are being increased in demand, but also where are the surprising decreases that we're seeing. In terms of increases, we've seen an increase of 50% for the request of learning experience designers. So people who are able to really look at that bigger picture, the wider experience of learning. But then we've seen a massive shift in the increase of project managers that have been requested. So people are able to plan during these uncertain times. But the biggest increase that we've seen is an increase of 375% for the demand of community managers. So actually building communities of best practice, but also able to utilize what is taking place within an organization, building that community, and being able to do best practice sharing, but also making sure that the information that is being provided is relevant in time for what is being required at that moment. Now, on the flip side of this, the decreases, we've seen a decrease of 40% in terms of instructional designer skills, but then also in terms of instructional developers, we've seen a decrease in 62% of those. So there's been more of an increase in terms of learning experience design to really look at that big picture rather than specific elements. Now, this isn't saying that instructional design and instructional developers are dead. In no way is that possible. But it's really showing that there is a growing desire in terms of organizations wanting to have somebody who can take that bigger view of the issues that they're wanting to resolve and really being able to be a one-stop shop to really help with those. Also, we're starting to see organizations look outside of the norm in order to actually facilitate skills. Some of the biggest areas that they're looking to fulfill are how do they actually have optimization of their internal technology. So making the best use out of what they have. So this can be people who can evolve and enhance their learning management system, their learning experience platform, but really looking at how can they provide the best experience possible without the need for a big team to be involved within that. In addition to this, we're also seeing corporations look at researchers as a vital part of their tools to really be future focused. So areas such as AI, chatbots, virtual reality are starting to be investigated by organizations in order to try and be prepared for the next 5-10 years. So being future-proof. Even though we're living in uncertainty, making sure that they are taking into consideration the way in which things might move. But then also, we've seen an increase in the skills for tech support. So people that are able to enhance the technology that an organization has by being able to let it speak to each other, making sure that the ecosystem works as well as it can. There's a big focus in terms of the skills that we have currently and the future skills that are required. There is, of course, demand for instructional designers, instructional developers, graphic designers. But also we are starting to see a greater demand for those evolved positions. So in the future, it's really going to be about looking at how can we bridge that gap for a instructional designer developer to a learning experience designer. What are the skills that are required and how can those be really expanded through best practice? These are really interesting times that we're living in, and I'll let you see what I'm finding out along this journey. But until then, I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time.
I'm speaking today with Helen Rutledge. Helen is the CEO of Totem Learning. And what Totem Learning does enable and empower employees with phenomenal digital content. So unpack that a little bit, Helen. You're based in Coventry, but you operate all over the world. What does Totem really do?
So Totem Learning develops serious games and simulations, augmented reality and virtual reality, as well as some e-learning. But what we're really all about is about taking the engaging power of games as an entertainment system and blending that with the world of learning and development to really bring learning to life, embed scenarios, and really we're all about making people love learning. That's really our mission. We believe learning should be really engaging, it should be enjoyable, it should be challenging, and it should really give you an opportunity to practice your skills in an environment. And so we work with organisations all over the world, where we look at their existing digital content, or we start completely from scratch and look at exactly what tools from the digital arsenal could be used to help their learners develop and improve.
So basically you start with where they are. So if they've got stuff already, you can work with it, enhance it, develop it. If they haven't, and they've got tools, you'll work with their tools to do what they want to do. If they haven't got any tools or any digital content, you'll recommend some solutions. Is that roughly, am I right?
Yes, absolutely. So we recognise that a digital transformation is quite significant for most companies. They're all going to be at different stages of that journey. Some have never done digital at all. Some have got really advanced kit. They've tried VR and played around a little bit. And so, yeah, we do a full analysis of where that organisation is. We understand what they need to take the next step on the journey. So whether it might be a little bit of video or a bit of e-learning, or whether they're ready for a full-blown virtual reality simulator, that's fine. It's very much always driven by the business, their needs, and of course the learner and their needs, and what have they been through before and what are they ready for. There's no point developing a really high-tech solution for someone who really doesn't want a high-tech solution and just wants something really simple.
Completely agree. I completely agree. Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of where you've taken something and turned it into something better, basically? I think using the technical language.
Of course. Yeah, well, we get quite involved with taking classroom courses, and especially at this point in time, we've done an awful lot of kind of conversion of traditional face-to-face classroom into digital format. And we did a similar exercise for a large financial organisation where they had intern training. And essentially the interns were learning how to audit a business, and they were given a big A4 box of paper to audit over about 6-7 days. They used to all be flown into a hotel. So if you think about flight costs, accommodation, the paper, there was about 2,000 of them every year. So we took that box of paper and we digitized it into a 6-hour scenario. So you play the role of an auditor, you go into the business, you go through various tasks. So you do the hard skills, but you also do the soft skills of, you're polite, you've got to make sure you fit in, because as an auditor, you're not necessarily the most liked person coming into that business. And so we obviously cut down on that paper cost. We managed to reduce the actual seat time by about 3 days. And overall, the cost saving to the business was about $30 million year on year. So there was an initial, bottom line saving. But the key thing, the thing that makes me really excited, is the fact that when the auditors went out into the real world, after they had done their virtual exercises, they felt more confident and the customers felt more satisfied. So, for me, with our mission to help people love learning, to have someone who can feel more confident in their job, that's a massive win. And then, of course, to increase customer satisfaction for our clients, that's just fantastic.
So would I be right in saying that what you're actually selling is a solution, not a product? You're not saying, this is our seamless product, take it and everything will be fine. You're saying, this is where you start. This is the kind of way forward we recommend. And that will involve certain tools. And these are the ones we think would work best for you. Or these are the ones you already have and we'll work with those.
Yeah, we have some products, some off-the-shelf products, but most of it's completely bespoke. Most of our work is bespoke. Or we help clients build products that they can sell. Yes,
so that's a solution that you'll come to, obvious adding value to 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. That's almost without any doubt adding value. And I guess the reason they don't do that is they have no idea where to start and what to use. And so you give them the know-how and you take them over that threshold from 2 to 3D.
Yeah, often clients don't know what's possible, and that's fine, because we don't expect them to be the experts in this space. So part of our role is very much helping them understand what's possible, but also not to be distracted by the shiny stuff. It's so easy to have a learning budget and say, well, I've just been to this seminar, they've got this VR kit, I'm going to buy that because that's going to engage everybody. But then the actual software that sits behind the hardware isn't fit for purpose. So we're all about making the money work as hard as possible for our clients. So, you know, making sure that you're spending your money effectively, and making sure it's, again, all about the learning and the learner. And so, you know, let's not get distracted because that's cool tech, because, you know, that's fine, but we've got to achieve a purpose. We've got to, you know, we've got to deliver value. We've got to deliver a proven performance, in the learner. And again, going back to our vision of helping people love learning, if we create a really bad product, we're going to kind of create the opposite effect to that.
So that's what you mean when you say enable and empower employees with phenomenal digital content. You are creating something that will take people further, basically, than they were able to go previously.
Yes.
That's right. And back to your childhood, there's a blog which is called She Can 365, and I think you're not day 6 of the 365 stories. And what you talk about is, as a child, coming into handheld games and the original Super Mario, all of that kind of stuff. That's what you grew up with. And you said in the blog, as an adult, I came to believe that we can make people's lives better and help them learn more through the power of gaming. Do you think that's everybody? Do you think everyone can learn more and better through the power of gaming? Or do you think it's for certain people who are kind of that way inclined, like yourself, for example? How do you tackle that when you've got people who've, well, it's not true to say they've never touched a game, but it's when people are antipathetic to the idea of gaming and games.
Yeah. Well, I think at heart we all like games of one sort or another, whether it's card games, board games, or digital games. We all play games in our lives. I'm a believer that everyone can enjoy games. It is a case of, having a bit of an open mind and having a go. And not every game is going to be suitable for everybody. And again, it's about understanding the learner. So when we're creating a new solution, we do an awful lot of a deep dive into who our audience is, really understand who they are before we even talk about game design.
So Helen, that was a very interesting conversation. I'm particularly pleased that you agreed to come and talk, and thank you so much. And all I want to say is keep it up, keep going, and I wish you many years of success. So Helen Rutledge, CEO of Totem Learning, it's been wonderful having you on Learning Now TV.
Thank you, Nigel. It's been wonderful to be here.
DPG's online courses are designed to fit around your life, so you can study anytime, anywhere. Get in touch now for more info.
This month, Robin Hoyle is back, and he's on to Teams this time, Kate. Robin is looking at the power of influencers and the way that they can help teams get the information they need in order to function effectively. And he's joined by a very special guest, only a very small clue, Cluck Cluck.
Hello everyone, I'd like you to meet Tallulah. Tallulah, everyone. Tallulah, as you can see, is one of our hens, and I was thinking about the concept of the pecking order the other day, and if you've never kept hens, then perhaps you won't know exactly how serious the pecking order is in the poultry world. It certainly is a thing, and recently we've had some new chickens join the flock, and Tallulah has been asserting her authority, not because she's particularly intelligent or because of the power of her personality, but because she's big and scary. And I think teams sometimes have a pecking order as well. In fact, most often they do. And that pecking order, I hope, is not enforced by the fact that, in this case, Tallulah is big and scary, but by other means. And sometimes it's not always the person who is at the top of the organisational chart. So it's not the team leader or the senior manager who is necessarily at the top of the pecking order, or indeed uses the pecking order to their advantage. Very often, the person with the influence within a team is not the manager. Now, in learning and development, there are times when you come back having been fired up by a briefing by the chief learning officer or senior management team, and you're ready to start this new initiative and this change program, and then you start meeting with the resistance or the comments from the team, and very often the team will look to one or two individuals who do not have hierarchical power but are clearly very influential. If they give it the thumbs up, then the chances are the initiative will go well. But if they're in any way sceptical or they speak out against it, then the initiative can sometimes start off on a very poorly basis and might not actually improve ever. So I was interested in that process because I read a story recently about the London Borough of Newham and their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what they found was that a lot of their residents in that multicultural borough were not accessing normal news sources. They weren't using the same social media sites that the government was putting its posts on. They weren't necessarily able to read the English language posters that were appearing on bus stops. And of course they weren't able to access some of the places that they ordinarily would have gained that information in schools, in colleges, hospitals, GP surgeries, etc., because those places were all closed. And so what they did was that they identified a number of influencers within those communities. Now, these were not influencers who appear on TikTok or Instagram pushing fashion brands, or people who used to appear on Love Island. These are people who are rooted in their communities, not necessarily the traditional community leader, but somebody who has influence just because who they are and the environment that they play in. So sometimes those will be people who ran shops, or there will be people who broadcast on very small radio stations across the internet specifically for example, the Somali community. And they recruited those individuals to help spread the message about the restrictions and the precautions that people should take. And I wondered whether or not we did that often enough within learning and development. Edgar Schein, in his book on organisational cultures, talks about referent individuals, those people within the teams, within the organisation, who have influence and power, who can really change the way in which things happen. And when we're introducing a learning and development initiative, or any other change initiative for that matter, sometimes it helps to get those people on board early. Not just when we've designed the solution and we present it back to them and say, can you please support that? Because sometimes they'll go, well, hang on a minute, this doesn't reflect our world, this doesn't reflect the way that we work, or this is too much of a change, or maybe it's not enough of a change and we need to go further. So we need to get them involved at the needs analysis stage or at the design phase. Get them involved as early as possible, because very often those people are influential because they're creative, because they think differently, because they've got real experience within the business. And so sometimes we can use that experience to our advantage to help us get a better design from the off. And then, having been listened to, those individuals can play a role not only in helping us launch the initiative and speak about it to their colleagues, but also in helping us maintain that process, because they've got somebody who understands the end goal, how we will get there, and what people need to do to enable the change that we envisage to happen. So they can be real powerful advocates for the process, not only at the start, but all the way through any kind of learning intervention that we design. So the first challenge you've got then is, how do you identify those influences within your business? And actually, as a learning and development person, you should have an idea of some of those people. You should get into those teams and see how they operate and understand who's really the person that individuals listen to. And yeah, it's important to get the senior managers on board. I get that. Yes, it's important to have team leaders involved. I get that. But let's not forget that sometimes they are not the most important influencer. Now, Tallulah's not the top of the pecking order in our little flock of chickens. In fact, she's only number 2. But she's cemented that position and she's worked hard to get there. And sometimes those influencers will also have worked hard to maintain their position in the team without necessarily having an aspiration to be hierarchically recognised within the management structure of the organisation. So seek those individuals out. It makes sense for Tallulah and it'll make sense for you too.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
It's time for another Martin Cousins inspired research report. And this program, we're going to look at a report written by Jane Bozarth from the Learning Guild. She's the research director, and I'm in awe of the amount of research that she seems to be able to generate. This one is a report called Evidence-Based Ideas for Virtual Classroom Experiences, produced by the Learning Guild. Martin, why is this interesting?
It's interesting because it's the only report that I'm aware of that pulls together everything that we know about the evidence around good practice in virtual classrooms, put it all in one place. But there are some caveats which emerge in this report. And one of them is that the literature around virtual classrooms has all been relative to face-to-face. And so it no longer stands because this is not, face-to-face isn't really happening or isn't happening. So this is about virtual classrooms standing on its own 2 feet as a digital learning approach. So what do you do to make it work, and how do you make it effective in terms of instructional strategy and the way it's facilitated? And in the report, Jane does highlight the fact that there's some anecdotal evidence from providers who are being asked to convert face-to-face programs into 6-7 hour long sessions or longer. I mean, can you imagine?
Awful.
You just wouldn't do that.
I've been banging on, Martin, for at least 3 years, maybe 4 years, about the dangers of translating from the real world to the virtual world. When you should be transforming, you should use the opportunities presented to reconfigure, rethink, and restructure, not translate 1 hour in the classroom, 1 hour on the computer. We know that way madness lies, and intense boredom as well, and completely ineffective learning to boot. Does that report back that up?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's going to be rich pickings of awful examples of virtual classroom experiences for all the reasons you've just said. And this report makes those warnings. You know, it provides some insight on that fact that it's happening. You know, organizations are requesting to have very lengthy virtual classroom experiences designed off the back of, you know, face-to-face programs. So this report is worth reading because it unpicks all of that. And
does it do the opposite, which is to give some positive ideas of where you should be facing, as opposed to warn you of all the dangers that you might be facing?
Yes, I mean
Good.
So it talks about some of the key elements for success, and you know, this does mean using sound instructional design and sound approaches to facilitation. So this is not easily done, actually. There is a lot of skill involved in doing this well. And if you read this report, you'll see why. So some of the key elements that Jane goes through are, I'm just going to read off my list here: social presence, situated cognition, the idea of learning and thinking happening in the moment. So that means that because that's happening, you want good engagement in a virtual classroom. This is not like storage and retrieval type approach. It's kind of happening in real time. So actually the role of the facilitator and how it's designed is really, really important. And then there's ideas around realistic practice. This is not about someone, like chalk and talk. This is about using technology to let people practice doing something. That could be role play, it could be tasks, it could be breaking out into collaborative work in small groups. There's a lot of examples in this report of how you can do that. And spaced learning. So the virtual classroom doesn't have to just be asynchronous experience. You can have some spaced learning design around it. And then there's feedback and having really good quality interaction between the facilitator and the participants, amongst the participants, and between the participants and the content. So these, when you think about it like that, there's an awful lot to think about and an awful lot to get right and potentially get wrong. And also then you think about the role of the facilitator, the size of the group, how you schedule it, the types of support you need to get it right, having a producer. There's all of that is in this report. And it's not too long either. So I think it's just really valuable, because I think a lot of people will be doing virtual classrooms now. And if they want to really do them well, then this report has a lot to offer.
Good. I agree with you. And I think we should thank Jane for digging into this and setting some pretty high bars for everyone to get over in order to deliver what we're supposed to be doing all the way through, which is effective learning. So thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Well, another great show. Nigel, any highlights for you?
I really liked all the interviews. I thought they were all very, very different, but also engaging. And everyone should know about Donald's book. It's a book on artificial intelligence and learning. And there aren't many books covering that kind of specialist field, broad but specialist field. And I loved hearing Helen Rutledge's story. A small learning company in Coventry, but doing a great job all around the world, and really working with organizations to exploit their own resources and their own tools, rather than saying, here we are, we'll do everything for you. So working alongside her customers, not working against them or expecting everyone to bow down before the great knowledge machine. So I really thought that was very impressive. And Suk has got a very, very interesting initiative going, as always. What did you think?
I think what occurred to me, as we've watched the interviews through, is these technologies, AI, AR, VR, they're only going one way. We're only going to be using more of these things. But to Suk's point from my conversation with him is actually, how and when and where can you best use these things in learning? They are going to become probably all pervasive, but how do you harness them, and what are you really trying to achieve with those? So it's great to know that people like Suk are out there to maybe help L&D teams get their hands around these technologies and use them in the best possible way.
Yeah, that was the theme, really. It was all about helping people do stuff, not doing it for them, and not putting their hands around in order to strangle them, but to put their hands around in order to support and help. I think that's a very good message, powerful message. Anyway, so Kate, thanks very much for the outro. And let me just explain 3 online conferences that are coming shortly. First one is DevLearn. DevLearn has gone digital from the 19th to the 30th of October. So a different kind of model, not 2 full days, but stuff going on every day. And that therefore overlaps entirely with ATD's virtual conference, which is from the 24th to the 30th of October. So they're almost one on top of another. So you have to flip from one to the other if you've booked for both. And then CIPD have got their ACE conference on the 11th of 12th of November. So a more conventional structure for them. So if anyone out there, anyone who's got any virtual events that they'd like us to promote, please let us know and we'll do our very, very best. So Kate, when's the next show?
We're back on the 15th of October. And Nigel, did you know it is our 6th anniversary programme? 6?
Amazing. Amazing how time flies when you're happy. And you don't look a second older, Kate. Even if it was a 25th anniversary, you wouldn't have aged a day.
It's very near my son's 7th birthday, so there's probably a very good reason why I wasn't around at the very beginning. But we'll be here next month with party balloons and cake. So join us then.
And when he's 21, we'll still be doing it, Kate, and we'll still be celebrating. Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Good to talk. See you at the next program.